The power had been out for 47 hours when Sharon Pemberton showed up at my front door with 3 other HOA board members, demanding I hand over my emergency supplies. I was standing in my garage, doing a quick inventory check of the community shelter supplies I'd been coordinating for the past 2 days, when I heard the sharp knock that could only belong to someone who thought they owned the neighborhood. My house sat on a corner lot in Meadowbrook Estates, a planned community just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'd lived here for 6 years without much trouble from the HOA. That streak was about to end. "Yates Owens, we need to talk to you right now," Sharon called through the door, her voice carrying that particular pitch that made dogs nervous. I wiped my hands on my jeans and opened the door. Sharon stood there in a pristine white pantsuit that somehow looked freshly pressed, despite the fact that we'd been without electricity since Monday afternoon. Behind her stood Gerald Martinez, the HOA treasurer, Linda Chen, the secretary, and Doug Whitmore, who I'm pretty sure just enjoyed being part of any group that wielded minor authority over others. "Sharon, I'm kind of in the middle of something," I said, glancing back at my garage where I had 3 pallets of water bottles, a dozen boxes of MREs, and various emergency medical supplies organized by priority level. "Yes, we can see that," Sharon said, her eyes widening as she craned her neck to look past me. "That's exactly why we're here. The neighborhood is in crisis, Yates. People are suffering, and you're hoarding all of these supplies for yourself." I blinked, processing what she'd just said. "I'm not hoarding anything. These supplies are being distributed according to county emergency protocols." "County emergency protocols?" Sharon's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "The county isn't here, Yates. They abandoned us. But we're here, the HOA board, and we're taking responsibility for this community. Which means we need you to turn over those supplies so we can distribute them fairly to everyone who needs them." Gerald stepped forward, pulling out a printed document that looked official if you didn't read too carefully. According to Section 12, Paragraph 7 of the Meadowbrook Estates bylaws, in times of community emergency, the HOA board has the authority to requisition resources from individual homeowners for the collective good. I'd read the HOA bylaws when I bought the house. They were mostly concerned with fence heights, approved paint colors, and whether you could park an RV in your driveway. That section is about using someone's yard for emergency vehicle access, not confiscating private property. "It's open to interpretation," Linda said, adjusting her glasses. "And the board has interpreted it to include resource allocation during emergencies." The February wind cut through my flannel shirt, but I didn't invite them in. Instead, I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "These supplies aren't for distribution by the HOA. They're part of the county emergency response system." "You keep saying that," Doug interjected, "but I haven't seen any county officials around here." "Have you, Sharon?" "Not a single one," Sharon confirmed, shaking her head with exaggerated disappointment. "Which is exactly why we need to take matters into our own hands. Now, Yates, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can voluntarily turn over those supplies, and we'll note your cooperation in the community newsletter when power is restored. Or we can file an immediate violation against your property and pursue legal action for refusing to comply with HOA regulations during a state of emergency." I felt my jaw tighten. I'd been working nonstop since the ice storm hit on Monday, coordinating emergency response across 4 counties. I'd spent Tuesday night at the County Emergency Operations Center, helping set up warming shelters and organize supply distribution. I'd checked on elderly residents, delivered medication to people who couldn't get to pharmacies, and made sure the 3 designated community shelters in our area had everything they needed. The last thing I needed was Sharon Pemberton and her homeowner association power trip. "You're not taking these supplies," I said quietly. Sharon's expression hardened. "Excuse me," I said. "No. These supplies stay here until they're deployed according to proper emergency management protocols." "Proper emergency management protocols," Sharon repeated, her voice dripping with condescension. "And who exactly do you think you are? The supplies are sitting in your garage, which means they are your personal property, which means they fall under HOA jurisdiction during a community emergency. Actually, these supplies are property of the Mecklenburg County Emergency Management Division, temporarily stored at this location because this address is designated as a Level 2 community distribution point." Linda laughed. "A distribution point? Yates, you work in IT. Don't try to make yourself sound more important than you are." That was the assumption everyone made. I'd moved to Charlotte 6 years ago and told my neighbors I worked for the county in technology services, which was true enough. Most people didn't ask follow-up questions, and I'd never felt the need to announce my actual position. I valued my privacy and didn't need the neighborhood knowing every detail of my professional life. "The supplies stay," I repeated. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." I started to close the door, but Sharon stuck her foot in the gap. "We're not done here, Yates. The HOA board is filing an emergency injunction. We'll have a legal order by this afternoon forcing you to comply." "Good luck with that," I said. "The courts are closed due to the emergency declaration." "Judge Morrison lives 3 streets over," Gerald said with a smug smile. "He's a personal friend of Sharon's. I'm sure he'll be happy to sign the necessary paperwork." I felt a headache building behind my eyes. "You're going to bother a judge at his home during a state of emergency to file an HOA complaint." "We're going to ensure our community receives the help it needs," Sharon corrected, "since you're clearly too selfish to share. I counted at least 50 cases of water bottles in there, Yates." 50 cases. There are 137 homes in this neighborhood. Do you really need that much water just for yourself? "Those supplies aren't for me," I said again, speaking slowly like I was talking to a child. "They're for designated emergency distribution." "Then distribute them," Doug challenged. "Let us take them right now and distribute them to people who need them." "That's not how this works." "Then explain how it works," Sharon demanded, pulling out her phone. "Because right now, I'm taking photos of these supplies in your possession, and I'm documenting your refusal to share them with your neighbors during a crisis. The whole community is going to know about this, Yates." Before I could respond, my radio crackled to life on my belt. "Base to Owens, come in." I unclipped the radio, very aware of Sharon's eyes narrowing as she noticed the professional emergency services equipment. "Owens here. We need you at the Oak Ridge shelter. We've got a heating system failure and temperatures are dropping fast. We're evacuating 43 people and need to redistribute them to other locations." "Copy that. I'm 10 minutes out." I clipped the radio back to my belt and looked at Sharon. "I have to go." "Who was that?" she asked suspiciously. "Someone who actually needs my help right now." I grabbed my keys and pushed past them, heading for my truck. Sharon followed me down the driveway. "We're not finished with this conversation, Yates. When you get back, you're going to find the HOA has taken action. Don't think you can just ignore us." I climbed into my truck and started the engine. Through the window, I could see Sharon already on her phone, probably calling Judge Morrison to complain about the terrible neighbor who wouldn't share his water bottles during an emergency. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't so tired. The drive to Oak Ridge took 20 minutes instead of 10 because half the traffic lights were still out, and fallen branches blocked several roads. When I arrived, the shelter coordinator, Maria Santos, met me at the door with a clipboard and a stressed expression. "The backup generator is working, but the heating system is completely shot," she explained as we walked through the converted elementary school gymnasium. "We can't keep people here overnight with temperatures supposed to drop into the teens." I surveyed the situation. 43 people, mostly elderly residents from a nearby apartment complex, sat on cots with blankets wrapped around their shoulders. Some were reading by battery-powered lanterns. Others were just staring into space with that particular exhaustion that comes from days without normal routines. "Okay," I said, pulling out my tablet to check the status of other shelters. "The Riverside Community Center has space for 25. The Methodist Church on Providence Road can take the rest. We'll need 3 transport vehicles." "Already called for them," Maria said. "They should be here in 30 minutes. "Good. Let's start packing up and getting people ready. Make sure everyone's medications are accounted for and double-check that we have their contact information for family notifications." We spent the next hour organizing the evacuation, making sure everyone had their belongings, their medications, and knew where they were going. Mrs. Patterson, an 83-year-old woman with bright blue eyes, grabbed my hand as I helped her to the transport van. "You're a good man," she said. "Not everyone would give up their time like this." I squeezed her hand gently. "Just doing my job, Mrs. Patterson. You stay warm, okay?" By the time I got back to Meadowbrook Estates, it was past 7 in the evening and the temperature had dropped to 28 degrees. My street was dark except for a few houses with generators humming in the background. As I pulled into my driveway, my headlights swept across my front door, illuminating a piece of paper taped to it. I got out of the truck and pulled the notice down, reading it by flashlight. Official HOA violation notice. The property owner at 847 Maple Ridge Drive has violated Community Bylaws Section 12, Paragraph 7, Section 23, Paragraph 4, and Section 31, Paragraph 2. Failure to remediate these violations within 24 hours will result in daily fines of $500, legal action, and potential lien placement on the property. The homeowner is hereby ordered to surrender all hoarded supplies to the HOA board for proper community distribution. I crumpled the paper and shoved it in my pocket. My garage door was covered with more notices, these printed on official-looking letterhead that said "Emergency Court Order" across the top. I pulled one down and read it more carefully. Judge Morrison had actually signed an order, at his home, during a state of emergency, demanding I turn over my hoarded emergency supplies to the HOA board within 24 hours or face contempt of court charges. This was getting ridiculous. I went inside, heated up an MRE for dinner, and sat down to write an email. The County Emergency Operations Center had sporadic internet access through a dedicated line, and I could send messages even if the rest of the neighborhood was offline. "Jennifer," I typed to Jennifer Walsh, the County Emergency Management Director and my direct supervisor. "I have a situation that needs your attention. The HOA in my neighborhood is attempting to confiscate the supplies stored at my location. They've obtained what appears to be a questionable court order from a local judge. Please advise on how to proceed." I hit send and hoped Jennifer would see it before morning. Then I went to bed, setting my alarm for 5 a.m. Because I had a coordination meeting at the Emergency Operations Center and needed to review the status reports from all active shelters before then. I woke up to someone pounding on my door at 6:30 in the morning. Sharon was back, and this time she'd brought friends. I counted at least 15 people standing in my driveway when I looked out the window. Some of them were holding signs that said things like, "Share the supplies," and "Hoarding is wrong." I threw on clothes and opened the door to find Sharon standing there with her arms crossed, a triumphant expression on her face. "Good morning, Yates," she said. "I hope you're ready to comply with the court order. We've brought volunteers to help transport the supplies to a central distribution point." "Sharon, this is harassment. This is community action," she corrected. "We've also filed a formal complaint with the county about your behavior. Several residents have expressed concern about your aggressive attitude and your refusal to help during a crisis." "My aggressive attitude?" I felt my temper rising. "You showed up at my house demanding I hand over supplies that don't belong to me, threatened me with legal action, and now you're staging a protest on my lawn at 6:30 in the morning. And I'm the aggressive one. You have a garage full of water and food while families are struggling." A man I didn't recognize called out from the crowd. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who's trying to do his job," I muttered, but I could see this wasn't going to end with a reasonable conversation. My phone rang. It was Jennifer. "Hold on," I told Sharon and stepped back inside to answer. "Yates, what the hell is going on?" Jennifer asked without preamble. "I just got a call from some HOA president named Sharon Pemberton claiming that one of my employees is hoarding emergency supplies and refusing to help disaster victims. She's threatening to go to the media. She's standing in my driveway right now with a mob of neighbors. They want me to turn over the supplies at my distribution point." "Your distribution point? Does she not know who you are?" "Apparently not." Jennifer was quiet for a moment. "You've been coordinating emergency response for 4 counties for the past 3 days. You've helped over 600 people, and your HOA thinks you're hoarding supplies. They got a judge to sign a court order." "What judge?" "Morrison. Lives in the neighborhood. Judge Peter Morrison signed a court order forcing you to give emergency supplies to an HOA." Jennifer's voice rose an octave. "Did he not look into who you are before signing that?" I don't think Sharon gave him the full story. "No, I don't think she did." I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Okay, I'm making some calls. Don't give them anything. Those supplies are county property and only authorized emergency personnel can distribute them. If they try to take them, call the police." "Will do. And Yates, this is probably going to get messy before it gets better." She wasn't wrong. I went back outside to find Sharon had produced a copy of the court order and was reading it aloud to the crowd like it was the Declaration of Independence. "The court recognizes that the HOA has authority to manage community resources during emergencies, and hereby orders the respondent to surrender all hoarded supplies within his possession." She read, her voice carrying across the quiet morning street. "Failure to comply will result in immediate contempt charges and possible criminal prosecution for theft and hoarding during a declared state of emergency." "That's not what it says," I interrupted. Sharon looked up, annoyed. "I'm reading directly from the order." "You're interpreting it however you want. That order doesn't give you the right to take county emergency supplies." "County emergency supplies," Sharon repeated mockingly. "You keep saying that. Prove it." I was about to respond when 2 Charlotte-Mecklenburg police cars pulled up to my house. Sharon's expression went from triumphant to confused to concerned in about 3 seconds. 2 officers got out. I recognized Officer James Richardson from the Emergency Operations Center. We'd worked together on several response operations over the years. "Morning, Yates," Richardson said, nodding at me before turning to Sharon. "Madam, I'm going to need you and everyone else to clear this property." "We have a court order," Sharon said, holding up the papers. This man is hoarding emergency supplies, and we're here to ensure he complies with the judge's ruling. Richardson took the papers and read them carefully. His partner, Officer Angela Martinez, was already dispersing the crowd, politely but firmly asking people to move to the sidewalk. "Madam, this court order appears to be based on false information," Richardson said after a moment. "These aren't hoarded supplies. This location is an official county emergency distribution point." "He told us that," Gerald spoke up from the crowd, "but we have no reason to believe him. He's just a regular homeowner. If this is really a distribution point, where are the county officials? Where are the trucks? Where are the signs?" "Sir, I am a county official," Richardson said patiently. "And I'm telling you that this is an authorized emergency operations site. You need to leave." "We're on public property," Sharon argued, gesturing to the street. "We have a right to be here." "You have a right to be on the sidewalk. You don't have a right to harass county emergency personnel or interfere with disaster response operations." "Emergency personnel," Sharon laughed. "He works in IT." Richardson looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes. I'd kept a low profile in the neighborhood deliberately, but it was clear that approach had backfired. "Tell them," Richardson said. I sighed. "My name is Yates Owens, and I'm the Mecklenburg County Emergency Services Coordinator. I've held this position for 6 years. This location is one of 12 designated community distribution points in the county, and the supplies in my garage are there because I'm responsible for coordinating their deployment to emergency shelters and critical needs cases." The silence that followed was almost worth the hassle. Almost. Sharon's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Gerald had gone pale. Linda was frantically typing on her phone, probably fact-checking what I'd just said. Doug looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. "You're lying," Sharon finally said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "If you were really the county emergency coordinator, you would have told us." "I didn't think I needed to announce my job title to stop you from trying to steal county property," I replied. Richardson handed the court order back to Sharon. "Madam, I strongly suggest you contact Judge Morrison and explain the situation. This order was obtained under false pretenses, and attempting to enforce it could result in serious legal consequences." "We didn't provide false information," Sharon protested. "We filed a legitimate complaint based on what we observed. You told Judge Morrison I was hoarding supplies for personal use," I said. "That's false. You told him I was refusing to help people during an emergency. Also false. I've been working 16-hour days since this outage started, coordinating emergency response across 4 counties." "How were we supposed to know that?" Doug called out. "You never told anyone what you do." "I didn't realize I needed to provide my resume to avoid being harassed by the HOA." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "Folks, I understand everyone is stressed because of the power outage, but this situation needs to end now. Mr. Owens has work to do, and you're interfering with official emergency operations. If you have concerns about emergency response in your neighborhood, you can contact the County Emergency Management Office during business hours. But you cannot attempt to confiscate supplies from a designated distribution point." The crowd was breaking up, people drifting back to their homes with embarrassed expressions. But Sharon wasn't done yet. "This doesn't change the HOA violations," she said, pulling out her phone to show Richardson. "We've documented multiple issues with his property that violate our community standards. The garage has been left open for extended periods, creating an eyesore. There are vehicles coming and going at all hours, and he's been storing commercial quantities of materials in a residential area." Richardson looked like he was counting to 10 in his head. "Madam, those aren't violations. That's emergency response operations. You can't fine someone for doing their job during a state of emergency. The HOA bylaws don't have an exception for emergencies, Gerald said, stepping up beside Sharon. The rules apply regardless of the circumstances. Actually, Officer Martinez said, pulling out her own phone. Under North Carolina General Statute 166A, Article 1A, emergency management personnel are exempt from local ordinances and regulations that would impede their ability to respond to declared emergencies. That includes HOA rules. Sharon's jaw clenched. So he can just do whatever he wants, ignore all the rules the rest of us follow. He can perform his duties as an emergency coordinator without interference from the homeowner association, yes. This is ridiculous, Sharon said, her voice rising. We have rights too. This is our community, and we have the authority to maintain standards. Not when those standards interfere with emergency operations, Richardson said firmly. Now, I'm going to ask you one more time to leave this property and allow Mr. Owens to do his job. If you refuse, I'll have to cite you for interfering with emergency personnel. Sharon looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. This isn't over, Yates. The HOA board will be meeting about this situation, and we will be pursuing all available legal remedies. You do that, I said, too tired to care about her threats anymore. The crowd dispersed slowly, with lots of backward glances and whispered conversations. I could already imagine how the neighborhood gossip chain was lighting up. Sharon and her board members were the last to leave, climbing into Sharon's white Mercedes with matching expressions of outrage. After they left, Richardson turned to me with a sympathetic expression. That was something. Yeah, thanks for the backup. Jennifer called it in. She's on the warpath, by the way. I'd expect some fallout from this, I figured. You really never told them what you do, I shrugged. I like my privacy, plus I didn't think it mattered. I paid my HOA dues, kept my lawn mowed, and minded my own business. Well, they know now. Richardson glanced at his watch. We've got to run, but if they come back and cause more problems, call immediately. Interfering with emergency operations is a serious offense. After the police left, I went back inside and tried to focus on work. I had reports to file, shelter status updates to review, and a supply delivery to coordinate for the Riverside Community Center. But my concentration was shot. Around noon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the Mecklenburg County Administration Office. Yates Owens, I answered. Yates, it's Robert Chen. Robert was the county manager, essentially the top administrative official in the county government. I just had a very interesting conversation with Judge Morrison. I can imagine. He called me personally to apologize. Apparently, Mrs. Pemberton showed up at his door last night with a story about a neighbor hoarding supplies and refusing to help anyone. She never mentioned that the neighbor in question was you, and Morrison didn't think to ask for your name before signing the order. So he signed a court order based on an HOA complaint without doing any due diligence. He's embarrassed. The order has been vacated, and he's drafting a formal apology. But Yates, this is a problem. We can't have HOA boards trying to commandeer emergency supplies. Jennifer is concerned this could happen at other distribution points. It's my fault, I admitted. I should have been more transparent about why I had the supplies. You shouldn't have to explain yourself to your HOA every time you do your job. But in the interest of preventing future incidents, Jennifer wants to put up official signage at all residential distribution points. Make it clear they're county facilities. That'll go over well with Sharon Pemberton. Honestly, I don't care what Sharon Pemberton thinks right now. She wasted judicial resources, police time, and your time during a major emergency. She's lucky we're not pursuing charges against her. Are you considering it? Robert was quiet for a moment. That depends on whether she lets this go. Jennifer flagged several concerning things in her complaint to our office. She accused you of theft, hoarding, and refusing to assist disaster victims. Those are serious allegations, and they were completely false. If she continues this campaign against you, we'll have to treat it as what it is: interference with emergency operations and defamation of a public official. I just want to do my job without HOA drama. Understood? I'll have our legal team send a letter to the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board explaining the situation and outlining the legal consequences of further interference. Hopefully, that'll end it. It didn't end it. The next day, I received an email from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board calling an emergency meeting to address serious concerns about county operations in our community. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday evening at the community clubhouse, and my attendance was strongly encouraged. The power was back on by Saturday, which meant the emergency was officially winding down. Shelters were closing, people were returning home, and the County Emergency Operations Center was scaling back to normal staffing. I'd spent Friday helping coordinate the transition, making sure everyone who'd been displaced had a safe place to return to, and that all the emergency supplies were properly accounted for. I almost didn't go to the HOA meeting. I had no obligation to attend, and after the week I'd had, the last thing I wanted was to spend my evening arguing with Sharon Pemberton. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see what angle she was taking now that everyone knew who I was. The community clubhouse was packed when I arrived. Apparently, half the neighborhood had turned out to see the show. I recognized most of the faces. These were people I'd lived near for 6 years, waved to while mowing the lawn, chatted with at the mailbox. Now they were all staring at me like I was some kind of celebrity or criminal, depending on their perspective. Sharon stood at the front of the room with the rest of the board, arranging papers on a folding table. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression could have frozen water. "Thank you all for coming," Sharon began once everyone had settled into their seats. "We're here tonight to discuss a matter of critical importance to our community. As many of you know, we recently discovered that one of our residents, Yates Owens, has been operating a county facility out of his private residence without informing the HOA or seeking proper approval." I raised my hand. "Point of order. I'm not operating a facility. My home is a designated supply distribution point, which is not the same thing. You're storing commercial quantities of materials in a residential area," Gerald said, reading from a prepared statement. "According to our bylaws, any business or commercial operation requires HOA approval and appropriate permits. Emergency response isn't a commercial operation." "That's semantics," Sharon said dismissively. "The point is, you've been using your property in a way that violates our community standards. You've had trucks and vehicles coming and going at all hours. You've left your garage door open for extended periods, displaying the contents to the entire neighborhood. And you've brought unwanted attention to our community, including police presence and potential media coverage. Unwanted attention that you created by trying to steal county property," I pointed out. A woman I didn't recognize spoke up from the audience. "I think we need to hear Mr. Owens's side of the story. We've only heard what the board has told us." "Thank you," I said, standing up. "For the past 6 years, I've served as the Mecklenburg County Emergency Services Coordinator. Part of my job involves preparing for and responding to emergencies like the ice storm we just experienced. My home is one of 12 residential locations designated as community distribution points, where emergency supplies can be staged for rapid deployment to shelters and critical needs cases. This isn't a business. I don't make money from it. It's just a strategic location that allows me to respond quickly when emergencies happen. But why didn't you tell anyone? Another resident asked. Because it wasn't relevant to my life in this neighborhood. I pay my dues, follow the rules, and keep to myself. I didn't think I needed to announce my job title to everyone. Maybe if you had been more transparent, we wouldn't have this problem now, Sharon said coldly. The issue, Yates, is that you put our entire community at risk. What if there had been a break-in? What if someone had tried to steal those supplies? You made our neighborhood a target without consulting any of us. Emergency supplies are stored securely. There was no risk to the community. You don't get to make that decision unilaterally, Sharon snapped. This is exactly the kind of thing the HOA is supposed to oversee. Major changes to property use, activities that affect the neighborhood, these require board approval. North Carolina emergency management statutes disagree with you. Sharon's face flushed. Are you really going to hide behind legal technicalities? They're not technicalities. They're laws specifically designed to prevent people from interfering with emergency response. Linda stood up, holding a thick document. We've consulted with our HOA attorney. While you may have legal protection for your emergency activities, that doesn't give you unlimited freedom to ignore all community standards. We have a responsibility to all homeowners in this community, not just you. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Sharon smiled, and I knew I wasn't going to like what came next. The board is proposing new bylaws specifically addressing emergency operations within the community. Any resident who wishes to operate as a designated emergency site must apply for approval, undergo a community impact assessment, and agree to specific conditions that protect the interests of surrounding homeowners. You want me to apply to the HOA for permission to do my job. We want to ensure that county operations don't negatively impact our community, Sharon corrected. The new bylaws would require proper signage, approved hours for vehicle traffic, screening to hide any stored materials from public view, and quarterly reports to the board about activities taking place at the site. That's insane. That's responsible governance, Gerald said. Look, Yates, we understand you have an important job, but you chose to live in a community with rules and standards. You can't expect special treatment just because you work for the county. I looked around the room, trying to gauge the crowd's reaction. Some people were nodding along with the board's arguments. Others looked uncomfortable. A few were openly skeptical. An older man in the back raised his hand. I have a question for the board. When my house was flooded last year, who helped me? Not the HOA. Yates showed up with a pump and a crew, and they worked through the night to save my basement. When my wife had a medical emergency during that snowstorm 2 years ago, who coordinated the ambulance and made sure the roads were clear? Yates did. So with all due respect, Sharon, maybe we should be thanking him instead of trying to regulate him. Several people applauded. Sharon's expression tightened. No one is disputing that Mr. Owens has been helpful in the past, Sharon said carefully. But good deeds don't excuse him from following community rules. If we make an exception for him, what's to stop other homeowners from claiming they should be exempt too? Maybe because none of us are county emergency coordinators. Someone called out, prompting laughter. The meeting devolved from there. For every person who supported the board's position, 2 more spoke up defending me. Stories came out that I'd forgotten about helping people during past emergencies, coordinating responses to accidents and medical calls, organizing supply deliveries during the pandemic. Apparently, I'd made more of an impression on the neighborhood than I'd realized. After an hour of increasingly heated debate, Sharon called for a vote on the proposed bylaws. They needed a 2/3 majority of homeowners present to pass. The vote failed spectacularly. Only 32 people voted in favor. 68 voted against. Sharon's face went through several shades of red. This is a mistake. You're all prioritizing convenience over community standards. When something goes wrong, don't come crying to the board. When something goes wrong, I'll probably call Yates, the older man in the back said. He's actually useful. The meeting broke up shortly after that. Several neighbors came up to shake my hand and apologize for the board's behavior. Others just wanted to chat about emergency preparedness or ask questions about the ice storm response. It was close to 10 o'clock by the time the room cleared out. I was gathering my things when Sharon approached me. She'd waited until everyone else had left. "You think you've won," she said quietly. "But this isn't over. The board has other options." "Sharon, why are you so determined to make this a fight? I'm not your enemy. You made me look foolish in front of the entire neighborhood. You embarrassed the board, and you've undermined our authority at every turn." "I didn't do any of that." "You created this situation by demanding supplies that didn't belong to you and weren't yours to take. Everything that happened after that was a consequence of your actions, not mine." "I was trying to help people," Sharon insisted. "I saw those supplies in your garage, and I thought about all the families struggling without water and food. I thought you were being selfish. Did you ever consider asking me about it instead of immediately jumping to accusations and threats?" Sharon looked away. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then she spoke again. "The board is going to file a formal complaint with the county. We're going to argue that your presence here creates a liability for the community and that the county should relocate your distribution point somewhere else. You're going to try to force me out of my own home. We're going to protect this community from unwanted government intrusion." "Sharon, I am the government. I'm a county employee doing my job. There's no intrusion. There's just a guy living in his house and occasionally storing supplies in his garage. You're more than that now. You're a public figure. People know who you are and what you do. That changes things." I studied her face, trying to understand what was really driving this. Pride, embarrassment, genuine concern. "What do you want, Sharon? Really?" "I want control over my community back," she said softly. "I've been HOA president for 8 years. I've worked hard to maintain standards, keep property values up, and make this a nice place to live. And then you come along, and suddenly nothing I do matters because you have some special legal status that exempts you from all the rules. I don't want to undermine you. I just want to do my job without being harassed. Then maybe you shouldn't have moved into an HOA community." She walked out before I could respond, leaving me alone in the empty clubhouse. The following Monday, I got a call from Jennifer. "The Meadowbrook Estates HOA has filed a formal complaint with the county. They're demanding we relocate your distribution point and compensate them for diminished property values due to government operations in their neighborhood." "How much are they asking for?" $50,000. "And they want you removed from the community within 30 days. I sat down at my desk and rubbed my temples. This is ridiculous. It's also a public relations nightmare. The media has gotten wind of the story. We've had 3 reporters call this morning asking for comment. What are we telling them? Right now, no comment. But Yates, we need to be strategic about this. The county attorney thinks we should fight it aggressively, make an example of the HOA board for interfering with emergency operations. But that could blow up into a bigger mess. What do you think I should do?" Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I think you should consider moving. I know that's not fair and I know you shouldn't have to, but sometimes the practical solution is better than the righteous one. I'm not letting Sharon Pemberton drive me out of my home. Then we fight, but be prepared. This is going to get ugly. She was right about that. The story hit the local news on Tuesday. A reporter from Charlotte's NBC affiliate did a segment on HOA overreach during emergencies, featuring interviews with Sharon, several of my neighbors, and a recorded phone interview with me. Sharon came across as defensive and petty. I came across as tired and frustrated. The neighbors who supported me made the HOA board look ridiculous. By Wednesday, the story had gone viral. Social media lit up with opinions about HOAs, emergency management, and whether I was a hero or a troublemaker. The overwhelming consensus was that Sharon and the board had overreached, but there was a vocal minority arguing that property rights and HOA authority needed to be respected. Thursday brought a surprise development. Judge Morrison issued a public statement apologizing for signing the original court order without proper review. He criticized the HOA board for misrepresenting the facts and announced he would be recusing himself from any further legal proceedings related to the matter. Friday, the county attorney filed a motion to dismiss the HOA's complaint and submitted a counterclaim for harassment and interference with emergency operations. The counterclaim didn't seek monetary damages, but requested a permanent injunction preventing the HOA from taking any action against my property related to emergency management activities. That's when things escalated. On Saturday morning, I woke up to find my truck had been vandalized. Someone had keyed long scratches down both sides and slashed all 4 tires. They'd also spray-painted "Government Thug" across my garage door. I called the police and filed a report. Officer Richardson came out personally to document the damage. Any idea who did this? He asked, photographing the spray paint. I have suspicions but no proof. Same neighbors who have been causing problems, maybe, or maybe just someone who saw the news coverage and decided to make a statement. Richardson looked at me seriously. Yates, you need to be careful. This kind of thing can escalate quickly. People get worked up about property rights and government overreach, and sometimes they do stupid things. I'll be careful. But I was angry. I tried to keep my head down, do my job, and avoid conflict. And somehow I'd ended up with a vandalized truck and spray paint on my garage because Sharon Pemberton couldn't handle being told no. The security camera I'd installed years ago had captured footage of the vandalism. 2 figures in dark clothing and masks had approached around 3 a.m., done their damage quickly, and disappeared. I couldn't identify them from the video, but their body language and movements seemed familiar. I sent the footage to Richardson and tried to put it out of my mind. I had work to do. The county was conducting after-action reviews of the ice storm response, and I needed to compile reports on what had worked well and what needed improvement. On Monday, the HOA complaint was formally dismissed. The judge, not Morrison, someone from another jurisdiction, ruled that the HOA had no standing to challenge the county's use of residential properties for emergency management purposes, and that the board's actions appeared to be motivated by personal animus rather than legitimate community concerns. The counterclaim was scheduled for a hearing in 3 weeks. That evening, Sharon called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Yates, we need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? About ending this. The legal battle, the media coverage, all of it. It's gone too far. I agree. So drop your complaint and leave me alone. The complaint has been dismissed. I'm talking about your counterclaim. If you drop it, the board will agree to leave you alone. No more violation notices, no more complaints, no more interference with your work. We'll even send out a community newsletter explaining the situation and apologizing for the confusion." "What changed your mind?" Sharon sighed. "The county attorney informed us that if we lose the counterclaim hearing, we could be held personally liable for damages and legal fees. The board members could lose our homes, Yates, over a dispute about bottled water and HOA authority. It's not worth it. You should have thought about that before you tried to steal county property. I know I made a mistake, several mistakes, but I'm trying to fix it now. Please, can we just end this?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to push forward, make them face consequences for their actions. But another part of me just wanted peace. I wanted to live in my house without drama, do my job without interference, and move on with my life. "I'll drop the counterclaim on 3 conditions," I said. "First, the HOA sends out that newsletter you mentioned, explaining exactly what happened and making it clear that my property is an authorized emergency site. Second, you personally apologize privately just to me. And third, you resign as HOA president. Resign. That's not fair. You abused your position to pursue a personal vendetta against me. You wasted county resources, police time, and judicial resources because you couldn't admit you were wrong. You created a hostile environment in our community and may have even been involved in vandalizing my property. Resigning is getting off easy." "I didn't vandalize anything," Sharon protested. "I would never, but you created the environment that led to it. Your complaints, your media interviews, your constant narrative about government overreach and property rights. You fired people up and someone took action." Sharon was quiet for a long time. "If I resign, will you really drop the counterclaim?" "Yes, fine. I'll announce my resignation at the next board meeting." "And the apology?" "I'm sorry, Yates. I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing at first. By the time I realized I was wrong, I'd invested so much in being right that I couldn't back down. That was prideful and stupid, and I'm sorry for all the trouble I caused you." It wasn't the most gracious apology I'd ever heard, but it sounded sincere enough. "Okay, I'll have the county attorney file a motion to withdraw the counterclaim tomorrow." "Thank you," Sharon said quietly and hung up. 2 weeks later, Sharon Pemberton resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons. The board sent out a detailed newsletter explaining my role as county emergency coordinator and apologizing for the confusion and conflict. They included information about how emergency operations work and why residential distribution points are important for rapid response. The vandalism case was never solved. The 2 figures in the security footage remained unidentified, and there wasn't enough evidence to pursue charges against anyone. I fixed my truck and repainted the garage door, adding a small sign that said, "Authorized Mecklenburg County Emergency Distribution Point," in official lettering. Life slowly returned to normal. Neighbors stopped treating me like a celebrity or a pariah and went back to the casual waves and brief conversations we'd always had. The new HOA president, a retired teacher named Margaret Williams, stopped by to introduce herself and assure me that the board had no intention of interfering with my work. "We're just here to handle the boring stuff like pool maintenance and landscaping standards," she said with a warm smile. "Everything else is above our pay grade." I appreciated that. 3 months after the ice storm, Jennifer called me into her office at the county administration building. "We've been reviewing emergency response protocols," she said, "and we want to make some changes based on what happened with your HOA situation." "What kind of changes?" "First, we're being more transparent about residential distribution points. Every location will have visible signage, and we'll notify local homeowner associations and neighborhood groups about their existence. We want to prevent future confusion." That makes sense. Second, we're creating a formal training program for community leaders about emergency management. HOA boards, neighborhood watch groups, civic associations, anyone who might encounter emergency operations during a disaster. We want them to understand how the system works so they don't accidentally interfere. Sharon Pemberton's going to love that. Jennifer smiled. Actually, Sharon signed up to take the training. She called me last week and asked if she could participate. Said she wanted to understand emergency management better so she could be helpful instead of getting in the way. That surprised me. Character growth. Who knew people are complicated? Sometimes they surprise you. Jennifer handed me a folder. One more thing. The County Commission approved funding for 3 additional residential distribution points. We need to identify suitable locations and coordinate with the homeowners. I thought you might have some ideas. I took the folder, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The whole situation with Sharon and the HOA had been exhausting, but it had also revealed gaps in how we communicated about emergency operations. If we could fix those gaps, prevent future conflicts, and build better relationships with community leaders, then maybe something good had come from the mess. I have some ideas, I said. Let me pull together a proposal. Over the next few months, I worked with Jennifer and the county emergency management team to implement the new protocols. We held community training sessions, established clear communication channels with HOA boards and neighborhood associations, and made the emergency management system more transparent and accessible to ordinary residents. Sharon Pemberton attended one of the training sessions. She sat in the back, took detailed notes, and asked thoughtful questions about resource allocation and communication protocols. At the end of the session, she approached me. I never understood how complex this work is, she admitted. When I saw those supplies in your garage, I just thought it was simple. You had resources, people needed resources you should share. I didn't realize there was a whole system behind it. Most people don't. That's why these training sessions are important. I'm glad you didn't give up on us. On the community, it would have been easier for you to move somewhere else. This is my home. I wasn't going to let anyone push me out of it. Sharon nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're good at what you do. The neighborhood is lucky to have you, even if we didn't always act like it. It was probably the closest thing to a real apology I'd get from Sharon Pemberton, and I decided to accept it. A year after the ice storm, Meadowbrook Estates faced another test. A summer tornado touched down 2 miles from the neighborhood, causing widespread damage and power outages. My garage once again filled with emergency supplies. Emergency vehicles came and went at all hours, and my phone rang constantly with coordination calls. This time, there were no complaints, no violation notices, no demands to hand over supplies. Instead, several neighbors volunteered to help. Margaret Williams, the HOA president, organized a neighborhood communication tree to check on elderly residents. Gerald Martinez, the former HOA treasurer who'd stood beside Sharon during the initial confrontation, showed up at my door asking if he could assist with supply distribution. I took the emergency management training, he explained. I understand how this works now, and I want to help. I put him to work organizing supply deliveries, and he did an excellent job. Sharon Pemberton, no longer on the HOA board, stopped by with coffee and sandwiches one afternoon. You've been running nonstop for 2 days, she said. You need to eat. Thanks, Sharon. Thank you for everything you do and for giving me a chance to make up for being such a nightmare last year. I accepted the coffee and sandwich, and we sat on my porch for a few minutes, watching emergency crews work down the street. You know what I learned from all this, Sharon said. Being in charge isn't about controlling everything. It's about knowing when to get out of the way and let the people who know what they're doing just do their jobs. That's pretty wise. Yeah, well, I had a good teacher. She finished her coffee and stood up. I should let you get back to work. But if you need anything, another pair of hands, more supplies, whatever, just ask. I will. She walked back to her house, and I went back inside to coordinate the response to the tornado damage. My radio crackled with status updates from various sites. My phone buzzed with text messages from shelter coordinators. My computer displayed real-time maps of damage assessments and resource allocations. It was chaotic and exhausting, and exactly what I'd signed up for when I took this job. But now, instead of fighting my own neighborhood while trying to help others, I had a community that understood what I did and supported it. Neighbors who'd gone from demanding my supplies to volunteering their time. An HOA board that saw emergency operations as something to facilitate rather than regulate. The tornado recovery took 3 weeks. During that time, I coordinated 17 shelters, distributed supplies to over 400 families, and worked with state and federal emergency management agencies to secure disaster relief funding for affected areas. And through it all, my garage served as a distribution point, my home as a coordination center, and my neighborhood as a supportive community rather than an obstacle to overcome. When the recovery effort finally wound down and life returned to normal, I took a Saturday to just relax. I was sitting on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset when Margaret Williams walked over. "The board wanted me to give you this," she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a certificate printed on fancy paper. Meadowbrook Estates Community Service Award, it read. Presented to Yates Owens in recognition of his outstanding dedication to emergency management and service to our community during times of crisis. We're presenting these at the annual HOA meeting next month, Margaret explained. We wanted to formally acknowledge everything you do. I hope that's okay. It's more than okay, thank you. No, thank you. You make this community safer just by living here. We're grateful for that. After Margaret left, I looked at the certificate and thought about everything that had happened over the past year. The conflict with Sharon, the vandalism, the legal battles, the media coverage. It had been a mess. But it had also led to meaningful changes in how the county approached emergency management and how communities understood their role in disaster response. Sometimes the hardest conflicts produce the most valuable lessons. My phone buzzed with an alert. Severe thunderstorm watch for Mecklenburg County. Possible flooding and power outages. All emergency personnel on standby. I finished my beer, went inside and started checking my equipment. Radio charged, phone charged, flashlights ready. Emergency supplies inventoried and staged. Whatever came next, I'd be ready. And this time, my community would be ready with me. That's what made the difference. Not the title or the authority or the official recognition. Just neighbors understanding neighbors, communities supporting the people who serve them, and everyone working together when it mattered most. Sharon Pemberton had tried to take my emergency supplies during an outage, not knowing I was the county emergency coordinator. She'd learned the hard way that assumptions and overreach have consequences. But she'd also learned, grown, and become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. That was the real victory. Not the dismissed complaints or withdrawn lawsuits, but the transformed relationships and strengthened community. As I prepared for the possible storm, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time living in Meadowbrook Estates. Genuine belonging. This was my home. These were my neighbors. And together we'd weather whatever storms came our way. The thunderstorms passed without major incident that night, but I stayed ready, supplies staged, radio on, phone charged, because that's what emergency coordinators do. We prepare, we respond, we serve. And sometimes, we teach our communities about what service really means. Not demanding compliance or asserting authority, but offering help, providing resources, and being there when people need us most. Sharon Pemberton had learned that lesson. The HOA board had learned it. The whole neighborhood had learned it. And I'd learned something too, that transparency matters, communication matters, and sometimes you have to fight for what's right even when it's easier to walk away. My phone buzzed again. Text message from Jennifer. Good job on the tornado response. County Commission wants to recognize your work at next month's meeting. Also, 3 more neighborhoods have requested emergency management training. Can you handle it? Absolutely, I texted back, because that's what this was all about, not fighting with HOA boards or defending my authority. Just helping people understand how to be prepared, how to respond, and how to work together when disasters strike. The sun set over Meadowbrook Estates, casting long shadows across perfectly manicured lawns and well-maintained homes. My garage door was closed now, the supplies temporarily stored elsewhere as we prepared for the next potential emergency. But the small sign remained, identifying this location as an authorized distribution point. A reminder to anyone who might question it. This home serves a purpose beyond just being a residence. It's a node in a larger network of emergency preparedness, a strategic asset in protecting the community, and a symbol of what public service really means. Sharon Pemberton had tried to take that away from me, not understanding what it represented. Now she understood. Now the whole neighborhood understood, and that understanding made all the difference. I went inside, filed my reports, and prepared for tomorrow. There would be more emergencies, more storms, more outages, more situations requiring coordination, supplies, and quick response, but I wouldn't face them alone anymore. I'd have a community behind me, supporting the work instead of fighting it. That was worth all the conflict, all the stress, all the late-night confrontations with HOA boards who thought they knew better. Because in the end, we'd all learned something valuable. And Meadowbrook Estates was stronger for it. My phone stayed quiet for the rest of the night. No emergencies, no crisis calls, no HOA complaints, just peaceful silence and the satisfaction of work well done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I could rest knowing that when those challenges came, I'd be ready. And so would my community.